Hello everyone, this is Dr. Mohana Roopa, working as a professor in the Department of Computer Science and Engineering in Institute of Aeronautical Engineering, Hyderabad. Welcome to all for lecture series of software engineering course. Today's topic, software requirements. In this, we have to discuss now requirements. What kind of requirements are there? So those are functional requirements, non-functional requirements, and domain requirements, as well as what are the classification of requirements. Finally, software requirement document how we'll prepare. These are the topics we have to cover in this software requirement series. Next, what is that? So the software requirements outcome, this particular topic outcome is illustrate the process models, approaches and techniques for managing software development process. So software requirements are how important in the software development process, that also gives through this course outcome. So next, what is that? So requirement means what is that? Requirements. What is a requirement? Requirement is a services the system is expected to provide and constraints placed on the system. That is requirement. Requirement is service of the system that is expected to provide and constraints placed on the system. So that is requirement. What that requirement? Requirement is another way how we may define requirement as a condition or capability possessed by the software or system component in order to solve the real world problem. So generally, requirement is a condition or capability possessed by the system or system component or software component in order to solve the real problem. So that is a requirement. So requirement engineering, in the sense, what is that? It is one of the process step in the software development process. Requirement engineering is gathering that requirements and what are that? Negotiating those requirements. Some of the requirements are negotiated from the gathered requirements. So then analyzing those requirements and documenting the requirement. The process is there in the requirement engineering. So collect or gather the requirements from the clients, and some requirements are negotiated, and finally analyze that requirements. Those are put in the form of documentation that is there in the requirement engineering process. So the way of requirements defined has a major part in the software development process. So because all other process steps are depends on requirements. This is the first step in the software development process. That's why software requirements gathering or defining software requirements are very important for the problem solving. So what are the classifications of requirements? There are two kinds of classifications are there. So those are user requirements. Total requirements are classified into two kinds. Those are user requirements as well as system requirements. User requirements are generally high level descriptions of the services. The user requirements are high level services of the requested services. Those are requested and constraints imposed. Those are user requirements. So generally the system requirements are more detailed, structured, as well as descriptions of the services. More detailed as well as structured descriptions of the services and constraints. Some of the constraints are also keep on that requirements. Those are considered into system requirements. System requirements. So the total requirements are divided into some categories. That means different kinds of requirements. What are the kinds of requirements? First one is functional requirements. Functional requirements. Second one, non-functional requirements. Third category as well as third kind of requirements are domain requirements. First one, functional requirements. What are the functional requirements? What kind of requirements are considered into functional requirements? So almost all cases, the functional requirements are the outcome, what are the outputs or comes through that problem. So what are the expected outcomes by the users. So those are generally functional outcomes. What input we have to give in as well as what outcome we'll expect. So all these things are there in the functional requirements. These kind of things are called functional requirements. So those are functional requirements describe the requested functionality or the behavior of the system. Those are services, that means major functions, as well as reactions to inputs, expectations, modes of operations, all are there in the functional requirements. So, what are the inputs we have to give it? So, almost all, what are the processes there, and after processing, what the output will come. So the that is there in the functional requirement. The outputs, expected outputs are also called in the functional requirements. So what about that non-functional requirements? The non-functional requirements generally represents the constraints on the system and its functionality. And its functionality like performance. Once the system is completed on the software developed here, our product is software, there's the product software developed there. So once that process is over, what is the performance? What the performance of that software? What the efficiency of the results will come? So generally, what are that some standards? What are the standards? Some reliabilities. So functionalities, reliabilities, as well as performance. All those things are also comes into non-functional requirements. Non-functional requirement. Those are not categorized under that user requirements. These are not user requirement. This is system requirement, right? So constant development of the process, how the system is developed, what the efficiency, what the performance, what the reliability, all those things are considered into non-functional requirements. Next kind of requirements are domain requirements. What about the domain requirements? Domain requirements either it may be what are that functional or it may be the non-functional requirements. Both are reflects particularities of application domain. For the application domain, what are the from the domain? Some calculations are also need. So some other what is that problem solution are also need such a type of requirements for in the solving of the problem as well as what are that from the problem domain. What are the requirements are also need. So those are called domain requirements. These are the different kinds of requirements: functional requirements, non-functional requirements, as well as domain requirements. One by one, functional requirements. What are the functional requirements? Already we know some other way we know about that functional requirements. These are the requirements that the end user specifically demands as basic facilities that the system should offer. So that means the end user requirements, the end user specifically demands as basic facilities that the system should offer. Those are called functional requirements. Those are called functional requirements. These functionalities need to be necessarily incorporated into the system as a part of that contract. Those are what are the functional requirements. Non-functional requirements are basically quality constraints. This is important. Quality focus on non-functional requirements, focus on quality constraints that the factors are implemented varies from one project to another project. Some projects are required the good performance uh, software. Some other projects or some other activities are need reliable, good reliable. So that's why these non-functional requirements are varies from one project to another project. Some of the non-functional requirements are basically portability. So that is the property, one of the property. Almost all cases we may tell about that non-functional requirements are also some properties of software. So portability, security, examples of non-functional requirements: portability, security, maintainability, reliability, scalability, performance, and as well as reusability. So these are the some examples of non-functional requirements. Again, non-functional requirements are also very important in a software development process. The software development process, so non-functional requirements very important. So those non-functional requirements are also categorized as product requirements, organizational requirements, as well as external requirements. So, product requirements, organizational requirements, all external requirements, all under the non-functional requirements. Product requirements are efficient. What are the efficiency requirements? For the efficiency, to show the efficient product or to develop that efficient product, what are the requirements are needed? Those are called efficiency requirements. So usability requirements, how we can use the particular software. So what are the usability requirement? How we can use, what are the requirements are need to use that particular software in our system? What are the external resources are required to run that particular software? Those are usability requirements. Reliability requirements, how the system will reliable. So that means how many number of errors will come, either maybe more number or less number or what else. Okay, depends on the error frequency. You define the reliable requirements for the particular development, software development. Portability requirements was the completement of this product as a software where we can apply this one, this particular software. Those are under that portability requirements. In which system it may run. So we in what are the other background scenarios are required to finish this particular product. So those are under that non-functional requirement. Under that portability requirement, again the portability requirement is also what is that product requirement. These are the product requirements. Non-functional requirement for organizational requirements. So those are delivery requirements. That is the responsibility of organization. Once the product is completed, how we can deliver? What are the requirements are needed? So that is called delivery requirement. As well as implementation requirements. How we can implement this product? So what kind of languages are need to develop that particular product? So that is also the responsibility of the organization who can take that responsibility to develop that product. So that is implementation requirement, delivery requirement. Next one is implementation requirement, as well as what are that standard requirements, standards requirements. What kind of standards are needed to complete this particular product in the development, product while developing. So these are the what are that organizational requirements, delivery requirements, as well as implementation requirements. Then what are that standards? What kind of standards we have to maintain in the development process? So these are the requirements under that organizational requirements. Those are under non-functional requirements. Those are under non-functional requirements. So next kind of non-functional requirements are external requirements. What about that external requirements? External requirements are also classified into three. What are that? Interoperability requirement. Second one, ethical requirement. Third one, legislative requirement. These are the different, what are that, requirements, ethical, what are that, external requirements. Once completement of the product, externally in the usage, at the time of the usage, what kind of requirements are also need. So those are ethical requirements, how we can use this, the product as a software in ethical manners, as well as what are that, some interoperability, how we can operate this product. So then legislative requirements, those are again what is that, privacy requirements as well as safety requirements. So what are the safety and security requirements in the usage of software? These are also under that external requirements. In the efficiency requirements, those are come performance requirements as well as space requirements. Performance, how the product better way we have to perform. The functionality, the functional time, the operating time, all those things are also comes into our what is that, performance requirements. So these are the classification of non-functional requirements. Non-functional requirements can be classified into three categories. Those are product requirements, then organizational requirements, then external requirements. Organizational requirements are delivery requirements, implementation requirements, standard requirements. Product requirements are efficiency requirements, user requirements, reliability requirements, portability requirements. Again, the efficiency requirements may classify as performance requirements or space requirements. How much space is required run to run this particular product. So these are the different categories of non-functional requirements. So mainly focus on functional and non-functional requirements. What are the major differences are identified. The major differences between functional and non-functional requirements. The functional requirements are defines a system or its components. Functional requirements defines a system or its component. So non-functional requirements defines quality attributes of the system. This is a major important. The quality attribute is the important of non-functional requirement. So here the functional requirement specifies what system should the software do. That means what should the software system do? What the system should do. That is there in the functional requirements. In the non-functional requirement, how should the system fulfill the functional requirements? How the software system fulfill the functional requirements. This is there in the non-functional requirements. So functional requirement is specified by the users as well as non-functional requirements specified by the technical people, example architects, software architects, as well as technical leaders and software developers. So because the system should perform the in a efficient manner, as well as reliability, satisfaction, as well as other portability, other maintainabilities, all these things are also responsible from the technical peoples. So, but here the functional requirement is specified by the only users, end users as well as the clients. So, it is functional requirement is mandatory. So, here the non-functional requirement may not be mandatory. It may have good performed whatever the product, or it may get that erroneous what is that product or errorless product or what else. Need not bother about all these things. Any product may get that output. So that's why the functional requirements are mandatory, non-functional requirements are not mandatory. Some other features of functional and non-functional requirements. The functional requirements are captured in use cases. Non-functional what are that requirements are captured in the quality culture. So the use cases are of set of sequence of actions performed by the users. That's why it is captured in the form of what is that use cases. So it is defined at the component level. It is defined at the whole system. So component is also the part of the system. That's why a module wise or a component wise or part of the system wise, the functional requirements are defined, as well as non-functional defined requirements are defined for overall system. Because overall system performance after completion of the product, what is the performance of the system, what is the reliability of the system. So that's why it is for whole system. It is only for component level. So functional testing like system integration is needed for functional requirement. Non-functional requirement here testings like performance testing, stress testing, as well as usability or security testing, and all the things are needed for non-functional requirements. Other kind of requirements are domain requirements. Domain requirements as well as specific components. These are the additional functionality. We have to add some additional functionality. So in the calculations, particularly calculation of some what are the expressions or some other data. So then we have to use the domain functionality, domain requirements. So the requirements specifically, domain requirements indicate specific computations, additional functionality, and constraints on other requirements. Those are there in the domain requirements. Domain requirements are the requirements which are the characteristics of particular category or domain of project. So that is there in the domain requirements. The basic functionality. Suppose the basic function, suppose here train, the declaration of the train shall be computed. The computations, wherever the computations are there. So for the computations, what are the requirements are needed, those are under the domain requirements. Domain requirements. Suppose D train is equal to an expression, D train is equal to D control plus D gradient. So D gradient, this is the domain requirement. D gradient is equal to 9.81 meters per. This is an example of what is that domain requirement. So whenever the values are there, then only we have to calculate other, or we have to compute some other value. That's why those are called domain requirements. So the majorly functional requirements are completed, then non-functional over, then domain over. Now come to classification, broad classification of what are the system requirements as well as software requirements or user requirements. User requirement should be understood by the users only. It should not address design and implementation aspects. User requirements are understood by the user only. And should not address design as well as implementation aspects. So it should focus on key facilities required on user requirements or the generally statements. Those are natural language diagrams and all. So come to system requirements. These system requirements are more detailed specification of user requirements. Generally define the users. So the users requirements, the more detailed specification of user requirements, those are including in the contract with the clients. Those are used by the developers as base for the design. So these are the things are there in the system requirements. System requirements are more detailed descriptions of the operational contents. Those may be sometimes functional, or functional specifications are also under the system requirements. So the requirements are different levels, different types of readers use the different ways. So what are the types of readers for the users as well as the system requirements? The user requirements are used by the client managers, system end users, client engineers, control managers, and system architects. So these are the people who are involved in the user requirements. Once the requirements are defined, those are the user requirements are specified in the requirement documents. Those can be read by what are the client managers, system end users, client engineers, contractors managers, as well as the system architects. Then the system requirements are used by the system end users, client engineers, system architects, and software developers. So those people are used the system requirements as well as what is that user requirements. User requirements. Generally, those requirements are described in the natural language specification, which can include what are the descriptions and the function service and inputs and their sources, as well as outputs and their destinations, dependencies, anything, preconditions, post conditions, side effects. So these are the things, are the suppose topic headings under that software requirement specification documents generally. This is the example of software requirement specification using the natural language. Suppose what is the functionality, what is the function that is the add more. So the name of that particular function name, what is the description required, what is the input we have to give in, what are the sources are used, as well as what are the outputs, what is the destination, what are the requires, preconditions, post conditions, side effects, what are that. So these are the what is that subheadings are there to define or to put the requirements in the software specification requirement document. SRS document. It is in the natural language. It is in the natural language. It's a common global communicated language that is in English. Okay. So software requirement specification is official description of a system's requirements. Once the requirements are gathered, negotiating, analyzing, finally those are put in the form of documentation that is there in the software requirement specification. SRS is an official description of the system requirements, Software requirement specification is a document. First of all, it is a document that describes what the system will do and what the software will do and how it will be expected to perform. That is there in the SRS document. Once the SRS document is over, in the sense requirement process is over. By seeing this SRS document, the next phases like designing as well as other implementation, all those things, all those people are implementation phase, people involved, those all people are also study this SRS document and they can go forward. So that is the main intention of this SRS documentation. The requirements document has a deserved set of users ranging from the senior management of the organization that is paying for the system to engineers responsible for developing a software. This is the major importance of software requirement specification document. So who can use that in the sense software requirement documents, how the people are used, as well as who can use that software requirement documents in the sense system customers. The customers specify the requirements and read them to check their meet and their needs. Customers specify changes to the requirements. Any requirement changes are there. So by follow this requirement document and they can they want to change the requirement. Those are put in the again in the SRS document. As well as some managers are also use that software requirement document. So those requirements document plan contains the plan, a bit for the system and plan the system development process. So that's why the managers use in the point of this the SRS document. System engineers are also use that the document for the purpose of understand what system to be developed. So system test managers are also use the SRS document. System maintenance engineers are also use the SRS document for the purpose of the relationship between the other parts, different parts of the software. So these many number of users are use the software requirement specifications. As per that SRS structure, as per as IEEE ANSI 83830 to 1993, the standards are the SRS document follows that introduction, follows the general description, specific requirements, some other appendices, as well as the index. This is the structure needs to be tailored for each particular organization in the preparation of SRS documents. These are the references followed for this particular subject. Thank you.
Like, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for more updates.